So, in the current age, computers have shown themselves into every portion of society. I believe that it's important to understand how these systems, which are so prominent in our lives, work. And that is what I'll be explaining for you all today. Hey everyone, so now I'm going to be trying to delve into what makes a computer a computer. So, humans have always been developing tools that help with physical labor, but what makes a computer different is that they work on computational labor, or tasks that we would complete with our brain. As such, the main goal of computers is to manipulate information. The four main tasks that computers work on are taking inputs, storing the information, processing it, and finally outputting the information. So computers have progressed quite a bit in such a short period of time. The first computers performed computations through mechanical components, like levers and gears. Then they started to switch to electronic components. These early computers were quite large, and you'd usually see one taking up the space of an entire room, but still they were much slower than the computers that can fit in our pockets today. Early computers were only able to work with numbers, but today the use cases are endless of computers. You can send messages to friends, write documents. Truly, there's no end to the uses of computers. So if we look back at that model of what makes a computer, we can see that it was input devices, storage of data, processing of data, and then outputting that data. So now I'm going to be focusing on how data is inputted into computers. Inputs are the way that we interact with computers in the physical world. These can include things like keyboards, mouses, controllers, and even buttons that may be directly on a device. Depending on what the input device is, you'll gather different kinds of data. Now, with IoT devices, you can collect data on the physical world and upload it to your computer. This is stuff like the heartbeat information you're getting from your Apple Watch. So now I'm going to be talking a little bit about the storage, processing, and the output portions of a computer. After data is inputted into a computer, the data is then stored in memory. Then the CPU, or the brain of the computer, runs that data through a piece of code. You can think of a piece of code as essentially a set of instructions on how to manipulate that data. Altered data is then fed back into memory where it will be called upon when needed. When we're talking about how this data is outputted, it's either outputted to a user or to another computer. Outputs can either be raw data, but if we're talking about the average user's experience, they are usually seeing a graphical rendering of that raw data. So now I'm going to be diving into the computer hardware that essentially allows a computer to act as a computer. The CPU acts as the brain that controls all other parts of the system. It works on both mathematical and logical computations, as well as sends and receives data to and from other hardware components. All of these commands are then sent to the CPU as binary electrical signals. Now, if we look at what the GPU works on, it handles the graphical rendering that a computer needs to do in order to create an output for the user. This is why servers who do not have graphical interfaces usually don't have GPUs in them. Now, if we look at the difference between memory and hard drives, memory is the data that is stored in the short term, whereas hard drive stores data for the long term. Memory is able to store and retrieve data much faster than the hard drive can. However, it will usually have a much smaller capacity. This is why memory is used to store data for the tasks that the computer is currently working on, whereas hard drives is used to store data for the tasks that the computer is no longer working on. The power supply is pretty self-explanatory. It essentially provides the power to all the components in the computer. Now, if we look at what the motherboard does, it allows each hardware component to receive the resources that are being provided by all the other hardware components. So I just want to say thank you for watching. That was my brief overview of how computers work. I hope that you all found this presentation informative, and I strongly recommend that you do extra research on this topic, as I believe that knowledge on how computers work can benefit every individual in their life.